and welcome to the Marley Bird YouTube channel. In this video, I will teach you how to do Judy's magic cast on. I first came across this lovely cast on in Nitty magazine. It was created by Judy Becker. It is a fun cast on and it is easy to do using a pair of long circular needles and any size yarn. Now, when would you use this particular cast on? It's commonly used for the toe of socks. You can see here I have several different sock patterns showing up, but I also used it to work up the stitches for the bill of a hat that I did. I then worked some short rows and plan on attaching this to a body of a hat to get a bill. It's a very useful tool for your knitter's toolbox, and it's one that you absolutely should learn. So go ahead and grab a long pair of needles, some worsted weight yarn, and I'll get you started with Judy's magic cast on. Let's take a closer look at the results of the cast on real quick. As I look at the tip of the toe right here, the stitches I am pointing to, those were my cast on stitches as I did Judy's magic cast on. Same thing goes over here for the blue color. I cast on all of these stitches. It creates a really nice toe of a sock. It does get a little bit lumpy at the corners if you're using a larger worsted weight yarn. If you're using a thinner yarn, it's not as noticeable. I have noticed that when I start with a slip knot, I do have a little bit of a knot here at the start. And so on this one, I did not start with a slip knot. I just twisted the yarn around my needle and began. And I don't have a knot, and it's a pretty nice beginning right here at both sides as I increase out for the toe. In this video, I will be using a pair of Addi Turbo Lace needles. You can see they look just like this. They have a really nice pointy tip to it. I like that when I'm working with socks. I'm also using a 32-inch length size 3 needle. Now, the size of the needle itself doesn't really matter, but the length does matter. When you are working these stitches, we will be using magic loop, and so a longer cord is always better than a shorter one. So I always tell people, as long as it's longer than 24 inches, you typically are okay. Let's go ahead and I will show you how to work this cast on with a slip knot. Go ahead and leave yourself a tail just like you would if you were doing a long tail cast on, and place your slip knot on one of those needles. The needle with the slip knot on it, I want it to be away from you, okay? So if we think of that as the top, the needle without any stitch on it, I want that close to you. So we're going to think of that as the bottom. We're now going to position our yarn just like long tail cast on. However, we want the tail up here working around our finger and the working yarn down here working around our thumb. So as I place my fingers into the slingshot position, just like a long tail cast on, this is what it's going to look like. What I want to do now is I want to take my needles and I want to go around the yarn on either side to place a new stitch on my needle. So I already have a stitch on my top needle, so I need to put a stitch on the bottom. So I swivel my needles up and around that yarn that's around my finger. Now I have 2 stitches. Swivel my needle down and around the yarn that's on my thumb. Now I have 2 on the top, but 1 on the bottom. So I swivel up and around the one on top. You will continue doing this for the number of stitches you are supposed to cast on in your pattern, or until you have the same number of stitches on the top needle and the bottom needle. Because we started with that slip knot on the top needle, as long as you finish with that wrap just like that on the bottom needle, you will then have the same number on the top and the bottom. Okay, I'm going to do 1 more there and 1 more there. Once all of your stitches are cast on, you then will take your needles and we're going to swivel them around. So it's like we just got them cast on. Now we're placing our needles into our left hand, just like we would if we were getting ready to knit. I want to make sure the tail, okay, the tail right here, which is now, it's the last stitch I used, okay? I want to make sure that it stays wrapped And then what I like to do is I'll take my working yarn and I'll make sure it goes around that tail. So if I go like this, can you see it's like around that tail? Kind of locks that tail into place, okay? We're in this position. You will then take the bottom needle, we're going to pull it out so that those stitches are resting on the cord. And we are in a typical magic loop position now. So I will go ahead and knit across all of these stitches that are on my needle. So I will just go into each one just like normal, knit it and pop it off. And these first stitches, this first set of stitches, they are sitting on our needle correctly, so we don't have to make any sort of an adjustment. But when we go to the other needle, we will have to make an adjustment, and I'll show you what to do. You're at the end of the needle, you turn your work, and you can do what works best for you. Some people have a rhythm of what they like to do as they transition to this. You can pull your cord like so and have those stitches back on the needle just like this. So you're sort of at a starting position again, just like where we were before. And then you can pull the bottom needle out, which puts those stitches on a cord, and you're back to your magic loop position. This first stitch we will work into on this top needle is sitting correctly, but it's also the slip knot, okay? Can you see that? So we have that knot there. That's the one I was telling you about. Sometimes I will start without the slip knot. I'll show you how to do that in a minute, so that way I don't get that knot. But you simply will just knit this one just like normal, and I'll hold my yarn in the opposite hand this time. But then these next stitches, see how they're resting on the needle backwards, where like the back leg there is forward and this front leg is back? To correct those, you will simply knit through the back leg. And you will do that all the way down the row. And this is the only time you will have to do that. As you knit these just like me, you will not have any issue with the stitches resting on your needle incorrectly past this point. It's just the nature of Judy's Magic Cast On, how those stitches lay on the needle at that point, okay? Once you get done with that row, again, turn your work. You can then put all of those stitches that were on a cord back on your needle, so you're back in a starting position. We're back at the very beginning, and what you will notice here, if I were to separate these needles apart, you'll see that we have knit stitches worked one on top of the other. So that would be the tip of the toe, and it begins to expand out from there as you increase at the corners and create a toe. On the back side, you see all those purl bumps? You see it? Isn't that neat? Okay, so at this point, what I like to do is I will usually add a stitch marker on my top needle to let me know that that was my needle 1. And then I continue on working my pattern from there just by pulling my needle from the bottom, make sure those are on the cord, and then I continue on. If you want to shorten up your tail, you can, but more often than not, I leave it the way it is. And then as I get a little bit of a toe worked up, I just tuck that tail right into the toe. Now, as I mentioned, I do sometimes start without a slip knot so that I don't get that little knot. And when I'm working with smaller yarn, the knot isn't as noticeable as when I'm working with worsted weight. But for those of you who want to know how to start without a slip knot, let me show you. It's super easy. Okay, just like when we were doing a slip knot, you want to make sure you have a nice tail. And at the point where you would have done your slip knot, we will put our needle there. So get your hands in the slingshot position with the tail over your index finger, the working yarn over your thumb. Take your needle and place it on top of that yarn that is spanning between those two stitches, or those two fingers. Put your needle on top. You're going to come down and swivel back towards you and come back up. Once that is in place, kind of hold everything, grab your other needle and bring it up there right beside it. Now you just carry on just like before, making sure you're scooping around that yarn to get to it. and you'll be set. Let me get this one on here. This is where I would turn if this was as many stitches as I wanted. Here's my tail. Remember, I want to make sure it's still wrapped around that. I like to make sure my working yarn is wrapped around my tail just to kind of lock it in place, because you saw how easy it was to possibly fall off. Pull the bottom needle out, and then you just start knitting across. Now I'm going to go across all of these so you can see what it looks like when I work into that stitch that is not a slip knot, but just simply twisted onto my needle. Finish there, turn my work, bring this back up into a starting position, if you will. Pull the bottom one down, make sure I have my working yarn. And this first stitch here, it doesn't have a slip knot, it is twisted. But it's real simple, you just go into it, just like before. And then these ones are sitting on here backwards, so I make sure I knit those through the back leg. Separate them apart, you can see what I got there. Easy peasy, and there's no knot. What do you think? That wasn't so bad, right? The next time a pattern tells you to use Judy's Magic Cast On to make a project, you can do it without any fear because you have the skills in your knitter's toolbox. If you want more videos like this, please be sure to hit subscribe and click that notification bell so that you will be notified whenever I release a new video to help you become a better knitter or crocheter. I'm Marley Bird, and I'll talk to you again soon. Bye. Thanks so much for joining me on the Marley Bird YouTube channel. If you liked what you saw, don't forget to hit subscribe. I've put a link right over there, or you can watch a couple of the videos I've already selected for you right down there. If you want to follow me on social media, I've put my links right over there. You could have all Marley all the time. Bye guys.